we are building a product that we want to see exist in the world. So first, we were building this for ourselves. We really wanted to get help throughout our daily lives. We really wanted to delegate the mundane tasks that we do not want to do ourselves, and instead, we want to just focus on what we enjoy doing while delegating the rest of the work. Today, this is done by people who have human personal assistants, but this is not accessible to everybody. And so we thought we should build an AI that can help us do that. And that was like the core motivation.
Welcome to Building with AI, the show where we engage in conversations with world-class business leaders in AI. Our goal is to uncover tactical advice to help you build and scale better AI products. I'm your host, Haroon Choudery, and today I have the pleasure of being here with Omar Shaya, the co-founder of MultiOn, a personal AI assistant. During our conversation, Omar shares more about his experience working on AI teams at Facebook and Microsoft and how that inspired him to build personal AI agents. Omar also delves into MultiOn's goal of democratizing access to AI, building products thoughtfully, methods of monitoring agent accuracy, and more. Before we dig in, here's a quick word from our sponsor.
Today's episode is brought to you by Autoblocks, the AI optimization platform product teams use to create world-class AI experiences. So, you just launched V0 of your AI feature or product. What's next? Autoblocks unlocks an intuitive yet powerful optimization workflow that helps you continuously understand, improve, differentiate your AI-powered products. Understand how your users interact with your product by connecting user activity to what's happening under the hood of your application. Improve your product thoughtfully and iteratively. Integrate testing of your AI products into your CI workflow and run A/B tests to see what changes are driving great user outcomes. Differentiate your AI products with powerful fine-tuning workflow that lets you turn product usage data into training data. Get started with Autoblocks for free at autoblocks.ai. Now, back to the episode. Great. Omar, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Well, really excited to dig in and talk more about MultiOn. Well, to kick off, it would be great if you could give an introduction of yourself and the journey that led to MultiOn, and then segue into what MultiOn is.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Omar. I'm the founder of MultiOn. And before MultiOn, I worked at Facebook and Microsoft on their AI teams. And then I spent some time at Stanford at business school, and that's where we started MultiOn. The company is building personal AI agent, which is basically an AI that can take action. And by action, we mean can use software on your behalf. And mostly we're starting with software on the web. So our agent now is trained to use any web application, whether it's booking a flight, making restaurant reservations, anything you can do on the web. Theoretically, our agent should be able to do. And that's the technology, which might be different from the products that we're building on top.
Very cool. Okay, so what was the motivation for starting MultiOn and for pursuing this angle in the Gen AI industry of going after agents that are able to accomplish specific tasks?
Yeah, absolutely. We are building a product that we want to see exist in the world. So first, we were building this for ourselves. We really wanted to get help throughout our daily lives. We really wanted to delegate the mundane tasks that we do not want to do ourselves, and instead, we want to just focus on what we enjoy doing while delegating the rest of the work. And today, this is done by people who have personal assistants, like human personal assistants. But this is not accessible to everybody. And so we thought we should build an AI that can help us do that. And that was like the core motivation. Now, also a little bit from my background, when I was on the Microsoft MSAI team, which is responsible for applied AI across Office, Windows, and other Microsoft products. And part of that work was working on the AI assistant at Microsoft and all these assistive experiences. And so that was when I first started working in this field and building some sort of AI assistant experiences and agent experiences. As you know, now Microsoft calls all of this the Microsoft Copilot. So that was also another seed that kind of got me thinking about this type of experiences and technologies.
Very cool. So you've been plugged into the AI space for quite some time, and it seems like this pain point of accomplishing what could be considered mundane tasks, ordering food, booking travel, those were pain points that you were experienced, or you were like, all right, let's take AI and some of the recent developments in AI and let's apply them to solving some of those pain points. What was your initial wedge? What was the initial version of MultiOn? How did you approach the product development process?
Yeah, good question. So my background is computer science. I studied computer science undergrad. I had a master's in computer science, focused on AI ML. And also throughout my career, I transitioned from engineering to product management. So I had a very customer-centric approach to building products. And that meant when I had the idea and I wanted to build this, the first thing I did is I wanted to just talk to people. And I talked to over 100 people that we talked with one-on-one in interviews. And the selection process was interesting. So we talked to people who are busy, who are already using human assistants. We talk to people who are assistants themselves. So their job is an executive assistant to someone else. And we really learned a lot about how do they do their work, what are the main use cases, the main tasks that they handle, and what are the shortcomings of using an assistant, whether it's human or remote or digital. And that was the seed for how we approached building MultiOn. And there were a couple of really key insights that also influenced our technical decisions as well, not only our product decisions. So to give you an example, we noticed that 90% of the tasks that people delegated to an assistant or that an assistant did on behalf of their clients were done through the web. And this led us to the technical decision of training an AI agent on how to use the web instead of training it on how to use a particular application or connecting to certain APIs. Instead, it led us to train an agent on how to use the web in general, which turned out to be a very key decision in our story and also in how things turned out.
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask, so you said that you interviewed a lot of human assistants, a lot of folks that were using human assistants, and a lot of those assistants themselves. What were some of those conversations like with the assistants? I mean, was there any hesitancy to chat with you, or what was the common sentiment? Or did you not share what MultiOn was working on at that point?
No, I was upfront about what we're doing, and they were open to talk about it. I think I learned that throughout my career as a product manager, where people were really open to talk about their problems and pain points, and even just talk about themselves in general. And so if you give them the space and you really focus on listening and learning, driven by curiosity, then people are really, really nice and really open to talk. So yeah, they were open to talk. And some of the interesting insights, for example, that came up, as I told you first, that we noticed as a technology, they are using the web mostly, doing everything through the web browser. Second, we noticed how they spend time at the beginning getting to know the person they're working with. So if you're an assistant and a new executive comes in, many of these assistants had a survey prepared where they ask people, hey, when we book you a flight, what are your preferred airlines? What seat do you prefer? What is it? Business class? Is it economy? When you want to order food, what are your preferred foods? Are any allergies? And this other insight also led us to, this whole concept of personalization that we are building into our MultiOn product. And so many insights came from these interviews. And personalization is also another area that's very close to me, because when I was working at Meta, I was working on the personalization team. So we were working on personalization algorithms to show the most relevant content to our users across Instagram and Facebook.
And what were some of the challenges that you experienced while trying to address this problem? So you're building an agent that's ideally hyper-personalized. It's flexible enough to accommodate for a variety of different contexts and tasks, whatever folks can throw at it. But at the same time, you want to ensure that there's enough control so that the agent doesn't go rogue and is able to handle the task in the most effective, efficient manner. What are some of the challenges that you experienced early on? And I'm also curious in how those challenges maybe evolved over time.
Yeah, we noticed that when you put a general purpose technology in the hands of people, like what we've built with MultiOn, they are not so sure what to do about it. They will sit and just wonder, okay, what should I do with this now? Maybe they will have something top of mind that they will use it for, but other than that, they will just not be so sure what to do with it. So we realized that we need to nudge people or inspire them on how to use this technology. And even more, the way we think about it right now is when we launch publicly, we're not going to launch with a general purpose agent. yes, we have the technology already, but we're going to launch with a more specialized or specific use cases so that people first can get used to using something like this kind of technology. And then we'll start introducing more and more use cases so that they can use them as well. So I think this was one challenge that we came across, but we think it's going to be solvable in the way you introduce it to people and also the user experience you build around it. So UX is a very big element of AI agents. I think chat is not necessarily the only way to interact with these agents. So we think UX and like visual interface will still play a big role there.
And how do you think through some of those UX considerations? Because it is a fairly new paradigm for a lot of folks to be able to have a chatbot or other form that the agent is displayed in, be able to handle tasks end to end. How do you think about what the ideal UX is and almost like car versus faster horse problem?
That's a good question. We are constantly thinking about this, constantly testing new concepts because there is no blueprint. No one has done this before. So we're trying completely new things here. And at the same time, it's important when you introduce a new product or a new technology, you give people something familiar. So our thesis is that, it has to only be 20% new, but everything else should be familiar. Otherwise, people will be afraid of using this new technology or not know what to do with it. So to your point about the faster horse, the main difference was that there was no horse, but the rest of the car looked exactly the same, more or less. Like you had the wheels, you had the seats, and you had seats in the front, seats in the back. So you can see how it evolved gradually so that you just replaced the horse with an engine, but everything else almost looked the exact same. And so we think the same applies to AI. You don't want to shock people with a completely new experience. And if you look at even some of the greatest innovations of our time, whether it's the iPhone, for example, or some other products, they also looked familiar. Like the iPhone design of like a rectangle touch screen wasn't like really new, but like the touch screen itself, the way it worked, the multi-touch, the pinching, the scrolling, all of that was the new part. And obviously with the beautiful design, but it wasn't completely new out of nowhere. So we think about UX for AI the same way. It's like, what is this 20% that's new, that's powered by AI, which is replacing the horse by the engine. And in this case, the engine is AI.
Yeah, very interesting. And going along with the iPhone analogy, the iPhone was inventing some new paradigms of interacting with cell phones when they rolled out the touchscreen cell phone. And they nailed the UI and the UX to a point where I think there was a story I read a few years ago that they handed the iPhone to a chimpanzee and it was able to accomplish specific tasks. I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but I do know that my 10-month-old daughter is able to actually use the iPhone in pretty impressive ways, in ways that I wouldn't expect. Like she seems to know what she's doing and the whole scrolling and whatnot. And so it's kind of taking familiar mental models and paradigms that may be intuitive to users and then building the appropriate UI, UX around that. How are you doing the same with MultiOn and understanding what the instinctual or most intuitive UX might be for users that may not be familiar with this type of workflow?
Yeah, so same principle. We are looking for the familiar yet novel. So what are people used to already in terms of UX? How do they use their iPhone, as you mentioned, for example? What are common patterns, common buttons, common icons? And really just redeploying this with an AI backend, with AI capabilities in the backend. So think of like, how you use WhatsApp. Everybody almost uses WhatsApp or iMessage. And you have the messaging interface and you have your list of friends that you can communicate with. And how do you press a button on any app to trigger an action by touching that? So we're really looking at the familiar concepts and just redeploying them in the context of AI. That's how we think we'll present something that's familiar to people. As you said, like anyone could use and ideally would use and will be 10x more efficient than using it without AI. So even with the same familiar UX experiences deployed differently for AI, but at the same time, the experience should be 10x better and less friction and faster and all of that. So this is how we're thinking about it and how we're like judging the experiences.
And when your users are interacting with the MultiOn agent, is there back and forth? What's the experience like for the user in accomplishing that task? How interactive is it? Or is it pretty much one shot? We're going to give it a shot and then either accomplishes the task or it doesn't?
Yeah, we try ideally to minimize the back and forth because we think the great thing about AI and delegation is that you just do this thing once or you delegate it once and you get the results at the end. So we try to minimize any back and forth, and personalization is a big part of that, where if we know you already and we know a lot about you already, we can save you from providing a lot of information that otherwise we will have to ask you throughout the process. So we try to have this information up front or use personalization to learn more about you over time. So you don't have to provide a lot of context every time, or you don't have to go in back and forth with the agent when you're asking it to do something for you.
And in terms of the initial use cases, so you mentioned previously travel being one that you're focusing on to start. How do you see the progression and the rollout of the use cases that MultiOn supports? So what do you support and focus on today versus what are the next things on the roadmap?
So just to be clear, travel was an example that we do well, but I wouldn't say necessarily it's the one we're starting with. And the reason is that we look at the frequency and the complexity of the task. And so we look at these two dimensions, frequency and complexity. And we see, okay, what is high frequency, high complexity that we can start with? Because that's where we think we can bring most value. And so travel is high complexity, not necessarily high frequency. It's not like a daily habit. And so we might not start directly with travel when we launch, but we can already do travel really well with our agent. We tested that a bunch of times. And so stay tuned. We're not fully disclosing, what we're going to start with in our first public launch, but currently in our beta testing, we have a wide range of tasks that we support and people are testing.
I like that framing. So frequency and complexity in the context of, for your user, the tasks that are complex to accomplish. Great. Okay, so my next question is around the iteration of your Gen AI features. And this isn't only because I know y'all use Honeyhive, but if you look at any of our previous episodes, even our Autoblocks customers, we ask not to mention Autoblocks, but more generally speaking, like what is the software doing? Like what is the job to be done, and explaining in a more general way. And so I can restate the question with a little bit more specificity. I'm curious, what tools and technologies are you using to iterate specifically on the Gen AI parts of your product?
I don't think we are completely set. We're constantly experimenting with new tools. But so far, let me start from the beginning. We have AWS, a cloud that we're using to host our applications. Our team likes to use VS Code and Cursor. So coding with AI is quite popular within our team. And we do use some tools to monitor our Gen AI queries and, for example, monitor the latency. We're building some custom work there to also measure the accuracy of the response of our agent. We didn't find anything in the market, so we're kind of building a bit of that ourselves in terms of how to measure the success and accuracy of the execution of the task. Our team also played a bit with some tools like LangChain and Llama Index. We had a couple of semi-official partnerships with these two. We are close with the teams there as well. So I would say we're constantly testing different tools. We're not necessarily set on a specific tool beyond like the basics of, GitHub repo and the AWS, some like monitoring tools.
Absolutely. Yeah, that completely makes sense. And you mentioned latency and accuracy. So latency, fairly straightforward to track. Accuracy, a little bit more difficult. Are you able to share just a pseudo version of what accuracy means in your context and how exactly you're defining that and how explicit you are with that definition?
Yeah, it's a very big topic. It's also constantly evolving. But to give you an example, we found that the best way to do this right now is to actually compare the agent to a human. And so what we do, we would record the task done by a human. So by maybe some of our team, or we ask for some help from outsiders to complete a certain task. And then we compare that task to how our agent would do the task, because our agent uses the web like a human would. And so this has been one approach that we follow, which is we actually record a human do it, and then we see how that compares to how the agent do it.
That's very, very interesting. So you're comparing how a human would do it versus how an agent would do it. And you're comparing specifically the tasks and outcomes.
And the steps to get to the outcome. Yeah. So in this case, the outcome is not always enough. So you want to also follow the steps that got you to the outcome. And so we also compare to that as well. And I think, this is inspired by RLHF. right? So reinforcement learning from human feedback has been there for a few years now. It's an essential part of, the latest GPT and other foundation models. And so we are using kind of our version of that for an action agent. And it seems to be the best way so far. I mean, we're constantly iterating and innovating there, but this is the best way so far to test the accuracy of our agent.
And let's say you have an instance of an agent that's maybe not so accurate. What's the step you take from there in order to iterate on the agent and make the necessary changes that you think will lend to the positive outcome, or at least help you take another pass at it?
So we actually show the agent how it's done right. And then the agent will learn either from a recording or from some other way to feed these instructions. So we leverage these approaches as well. So our agent is in the teaching mode. It's actually observing and learning how to do things. And that way, when things go wrong, we kind of nudge it towards the right process or approach. And this typically also generalizes really well. So if it sees the same issue somewhere else, it will typically then behave correctly again.
I see. That makes sense. So just to clarify, you're in what stage of rollout for MultiOn right now?
So we have a few hundred beta users now. We have tens of thousands of people on the wait list who would like to join, but we are rolling out slowly, and our public release is going to come at some point in the future.
Awesome. So you have users that are using this, and what about the instances where you don't necessarily have the training data that essentially gives you the correct version of a specific task being accomplished for the agent? So in those cases where you have users that maybe have negative outcomes, does your team manually go in and do you try to achieve that outcome on your own in a successful manner and then retrain it? Or is there other tinkering that goes on behind the scenes where maybe you're adjusting some prompts and you're adjusting some other parameters and seeing if that moves the needle?
Yeah, in the context of this private beta, we actually added the feedback mechanism into the agent. So when a task is complete, even at a step level, users can give us feedback, whether it's in a thumbs up, thumbs down. They can also share a text feedback. They can share screenshots or videos, recording. So this is just uniquely for the testing purposes. So this is not part of the product, but actually it's part of the private beta, is where you can actually record the agent doing something wrong. And so this data will be fed to us, and then we will act on it.
I see. That makes sense. And iteration is just so important in just about every part of the Gen AI space. It's obviously getting a lot of attention, and it seems like you have tooling and workflows in place to help you iterate on MultiOn quickly. Now, you mentioned you were at Microsoft before, and Microsoft has their Copilot, and there's other agent applications that are being developed as well. How do you see yourself in the space, and maybe some of the lines in the space that help delineate certain segments of products? And then I'm also curious to learn what you think it's going to take to succeed in the specific part of that space that you're in.
Yeah, so we started as a company working for mostly consumer or prosumer. Many people like to call us prosumer, where the use cases can be, between both life and work. But you can say we are at the core a consumer AI company that is building an AI agent for individuals. Now, it turns out also that our technology is really helpful for many other companies. So we get a ton of inbound from people to wanting to use our technology as an API, so to embed it within their own whatever SaaS platform, B2B product. And so we are still yet to decide whether to kind of make that as an offering, but I would say we are first a consumer AI company. And so that's where I see us fit within this ecosystem. I think most of the companies I've seen so far are more focused on enterprise use cases, maybe with a few exceptions, or at least the ones I've seen. And I think the second part of your question was, what would it take to succeed in the space? I think there is nothing new here. What it would take to succeed in the space is the same thing that it took to succeed in the past, whether in the mobile era or in the web era or in the PC era. So I think building great products that solve customer problems, building great products that people like to use is the path to success here. I think we just have a new technology that we need to figure out how to leverage. But other than that, I think the exact same principles still apply. And so whoever figures that out first is the one that's going to win. And as I said earlier, like we are also extremely user-centric. We build great technology. We have an amazing team of AI researchers and experts. But at the same time, we have also a great team of product people, design people who are top-notch at what they do. And so we're very focused on being user-centric and customer-centric.
Awesome. Omar, I'm curious to learn, what are your biggest learnings over the time that you've spent building MultiOn to where it is today? And learnings can be business oriented, but I'm especially interested in learnings from working with foundation models and in the generative AI space.
It's been a very exciting journey. And also to give you some context, I started working on this before ChatGPT was released. So I still remember working on this in like June, July last year and telling people I'm looking into LLMs, and people thinking, oh, you mean the law degree? There's a law degree called LLM. So LLMs 1 year ago were not really very known outside of technical groups of people. And so it was an interesting journey to see how the industry changed in such a short time, and how just mainly through ChatGPT and like making a product easily accessible to everyone, that people finally realize the power of these models. So I would say the main learning on a high level is that these are just technologies. There is nothing magical about it. I think if you read up a bit on how they work and so on, everything will make a lot of sense. And so with a bit of background and theoretical understanding of how these things work, you'll be able to control them and make them work for you. And so I think that because we understand how these things work and we understand how to influence these things, then we can leverage them to do what we want. Another big learning is that great engineering is still required. So it's not enough to just use an LLM out of the box, or even if you're building your own LLM. You still need great engineering to turn these into useful products. So how do you scale? How do you have very little latency? How do you build great user experiences and UIs? So all of these are still key. Maybe early days, we didn't really worry so much about that because we thought, oh, it's all about the AI. But once you have the AI working, you discover that, oh, now what? Now we have all of these other issues we need to handle, like the latency, the scalability, and then the great user experience. But that's another learning. I would say, you still need great engineering teams to just cover the basics and the fundamentals.
Very well said. Now, one of the things I'd like to ask guests is, what is your hottest take about AI right now?
I would say I'm fairly optimistic about AI. And I think my hottest take is that I'm not so worried about the dangers of AI as maybe they might be portrayed. I think this is just another technology that we will be able to work with, and we will notice when there are some risks and we will handle them. I think sometimes I'm a bit surprised by the heightened alertness around the risks of AI. I think maybe it's just another technology that we will be able to handle. I'm sure it will have a great impact, but I think I'm much more optimistic about its potential and benefits and less worried about its risks. And I think highly confident that we will be able to easily handle these risks as we did with every other technology.
Great. And Omar, what is up ahead for MultiOn? What are you most excited about for the future of your MultiOn product?
I'm absolutely really excited first about putting our first consumer product out there in the hands of people. I think it might be a bit surprising at first for people to see what we're working on, but I think it's going to be really, really transformative. It's going to be really fun, and I'm sure it will make life better and will get people closer together. We really want to build useful technology for every single person. And so we want to democratize access to the benefits of AI, not only to AI itself, but we want to democratize access to the benefits of AI. We want to democratize access to help. So, not everybody can afford help through personal or executive assistants, but maybe through AI, we'll be able to make it so cheap that anyone can have access to this kind of help so that they can delegate tasks that they don't want to do themselves and focus on doing what they enjoy doing most.
Great. Now, where can folks sign up for MultiOn waitlist, learn more about the product and about you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our website, multion.ai, we're working on a new version, so please excuse the current version. We are on Twitter, multion_AI. We're on LinkedIn, MultiOn, and people also can follow me on Twitter, Omar Shaya, Shaya, on Twitter as well, or X now.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining the show, Omar.
Thanks. Great to be with you, Haroon.